I'm Stefan Ried with Forrester Research, and as you know, Forrester Research is an independent analyst firm and globally acting. And within Forrester, I'm really looking at the emerging platform trends and platform strategy on a global basis. And this webinar today is really targeting at service providers, at telcos, at cloud providers, at those that want to become a cloud broker potentially. We have also a few people on the CIO or corporate IT role. You are more than welcome to join that, although you will realize some of that message is really tailored to the telcos, but you can reach out to Cordys or to Forrester if you need to have more details in your role. So jumping right into it, as Matt from Cordys mentioned, we did a report in addition to the reports that Forrester had already published around the cloud broker model. We did a thought leadership paper, which is not really only a white paper talking about an opinion, really looking into a specific market readiness or into specific here the situation, how big and how quickly the broker market becomes true. And I'd like to start with sharing basically the key findings, what we found out in that research that we did for Cordys. First of all, the cloud broker term is, in most people's opinion, still evolving. The business model and also the set of technology that you need is about to change. Enterprises and small and medium businesses have a different focus. I will go into a lot more detail explaining what the focus of SMBs is, why it is more around SaaS applications, while enterprises look more around infrastructure broker models. And also the components are a lot in change and today are not integrated. So there is no full kind of a cloud broker stack that you can buy, even as a telco. It is not. So if you think of OSS stacks or these kind of evolutionary stacks of telco operations, this is not there for cloud broker models today. So you need to buy different components or build the missing pieces and integrate it, which is a major major challenge. So you see here also again the link to the survey and the resulting report that we did for Cordys. And we interviewed only 10 cloud providers, major telcos, system integrators, and 2 dedicated cloud providers. This sounds like a small sample. It is actually a small sample, but we picked those telcos that represent quite a majority of users. So behind that survey is the trend of millions of small, medium enterprises or millions of users at large enterprises. Please keep that in mind. And before I move on, I'd like to bring up quickly the first poll, which asks, do you believe the cloud broker is already established? And now you might see the poll on the screen and could quickly answer like nobody knows exactly what that is, or maybe only vendors and service providers know what it is, or maybe you have the opinion that customers already also know what it is. And if you've done your click, I move on to the next slide. Good. So here you see an example of a quote that we found in the research that we did with the major cloud providers and telcos, which says there is no definite cloud broker definition in our company. We understand the terminology, but do not define it well in terms of customer needs. So that is an interesting statement because it means they investigated quite a lot in it, but haven't really mapped the capabilities to the different different customer needs and demand. So let's have a look quickly at the driver. What are the drivers behind cloud brokerage? And one of the key driving forces is definitely the increasing total market share of cloud and market size of cloud computing, both on the infrastructure and on the software applications side. And I shared at a couple of presentations that I did over the last year at Cordys annual event, the Cordio, a lot of that data, and I'd like to encourage you to look up the speeches that I gave on the Cordys events on, I think it's cordial.cordys.com. But I'd like to point out one specifically, which is here the number of SaaS applications. And the number of SaaS applications are increasingly significantly over time. So it means that today already 9 different software as a service applications in average in all companies, more than 20 employees, so from the small, medium to the very large size, are used at the same time. And next year it will be even in the range of 13. And that means it is an emerging confusion around multiple SaaS applications, or the other way around. SaaS is the kind of best of breed, next generation of best of breed for enterprises. Also, the efforts of vendor consolidation and product consolidations are over for most CIOs, and this is actually now swinging in the opposite again. And just the picture looks similar on infrastructure as a service adoptions. Many people have heterogeneous infrastructure sourcing strategies, getting infrastructure as a service from multiple different providers. So having this said, it's kind of amazing what the results to this poll was. So 30% answers nobody knows what a cloud broker is. 64% answer only vendors know what it is, and 6% answer, well, customers know already what it is as well. So I think the market should know more about the cloud brokers, and that's one of the motivations to do this webinar today. Help you as a cloud provider to evangelize the value of cloud brokerage, and then create a kind of push to the market. Also help you to differentiate with cloud broker offerings. So let's have a look at the concept quickly, and the concept is easy to explain with an analogy. So in this analogy, I'm looking at infrastructure, and I take the example of a private infrastructure. So most of us do have a private car, right? So guess what? The utilization of a private car is only about 7%. 7%. That's pretty poor. So if my private car would be an IT resource, it's incredibly poor. So it's standing in the garage next to the house, next to the office, next to the airport most of the time. So on the other side, if I'm flying to end of the month, flying to the United States again, and if I ask my boss to pay me a private plane, I very likely don't get it, because it's so natural and obvious that I sit in a plane shared with many other people. So that's the duality between public and private. And in about 3 or 4 years from now, people will say absolutely naturally some stuff is in a shared public environment, while other stuff remains on-premise for a long time, maybe for privacy reasons, maybe for legal reasons, maybe just out of the feeling of luxury or I don't know. But what is interesting now, if I take the example of the usage of public transportation, especially airplanes and maybe something even train tickets, what I do actually is I don't go to Expedia on my own as a business user. I go to my travel agency and ask them, you know, I need to fly to that city next week, get me a ticket. And you know my SLA. SLAs on travel is pretty simple, right? You have only two levels, coach and business class, and unfortunately the former one is usually the one that I have to pick by the company policy. So even if I want to violate the company policy, the corporate travel agency or the travel agency that acts in the corporate mandate says, hey, you can't do it because that's against your policy. So they are kind of safeguarding me as well. And you know, at the end, they just do it and do the ticketing, and they take a lot of responsibility for me and act sometimes even autonomously. So, for example, I got a call from my travel agency last month saying, "Hey, Stefan, just for your information, we rebooked you from a Lufthansa to a United flight on that day." And there's no real change for you, but the tariff changed a little bit, and that was easier for us to save money. I said, okay. And actually, you know, that's all you can say. And that's this kind of role that also in Cloud Broker will take in terms of cloud resources. So if you just articulate what you want and have a third party or a function that acts on your behalf to find the best options, that's what you expect from Cloud Broker. So how do people move into that? And here's what we've seen at Forrester, and it's also published. See the reference at the bottom of this page. That's how we saw and see today how people adopt to that model. And the interesting situation is that people are not going straight. So CIOs are kind of alternating either on a business innovation or on a technical innovation. So most people, for example, moved from grid computing when they got the ability to create large compute grids. They moved into a consolidation of business apps, for example, consolidating many different ERP apps into one SAP environment, what many CIOs did. And actually the challenge here was not the technical, because that was done already by the grid and scale out architecture. The challenge was really the consolidation of business processes, so it was a business evolution. And from there, many people moved into for example, a virtualized data center on-premise, or moved into infrastructure as a service usage. And those steps were technical steps again. But for example, moving from an on-premise virtualized data center into a private cloud, that's a huge business step. It changed the engagement model between IT and the line of business. So that is the same what happens if you move, for example, from an infrastructure as a service usage with a cloud provider into cloud bursting scenarios that I'm explaining in 2 slides further on. And so finally, moving from those 2 options, having a private cloud and having a bursting scenario in public clouds, moving from that into the next level of an economic model, basically a huge business model evolution, is then the Cloud Broker. And right now, I'd like to raise up the second polling question that we have, asking, have you seen enterprises using actually broker scenarios that are kind of moving beyond discrete usage of a infrastructure as a service or private cloud or whatever. So you see now on the screen quickly the question, have you seen enterprises using that? Yes or not yet, or maybe you don't believe in that at all. Make your click quickly, and I move on to the next slide. Good. So what you see now on slide 15 is what it means for vendors, for service providers. So most of you in the call today are cloud providers or coming from a hosting provider model or from a telco model. And what you see here is basically in this three corners the original, I would say, pre-cloud business models. Pure hosting providers on the bottom, pure ISVs, independent software vendors on the left, and pure consulting models on the right. And what you see in this combination of the three circles here is that basically all of those models are reshaping and transforming. That means those models are coming together in a new mixture in cloud computing terms. For example, quite obviously, software vendors are becoming a cloud enabler or a software as a service provider. But if you are a software as a service provider, you're also providing kind of infrastructure or reselling infrastructure, because that's what people expect. If you just keep a software model, you might sell a tool that you can put on a cloud, but that's not significantly different. The same with consulting. If you are just keeping a pure consulting model, you might help customers to build a cloud. If you do more, you might add value-added reseller services or cloud integration services and so on. So why is the cloud broker in the middle? The cloud broker is in the middle because it's, in my opinion, one of the most complex models that requires some investment, not only in technology but also in understanding the business model. And it has some parts from a software vendor side, because the cloud stack that you can, or the components that you can buy from vendors like Cordys, are not serving everything, because there's no full integrated, ready-to-go, complete cloud broker stack. So you might have to develop some stuff on your own actually to provide a cloud broker service. Also, cloud brokers are most likely working well if you also provide infrastructure services. Actually, we even see a couple of slides later that it's the other way around. Cloud brokers are an enabler to sell successfully elastic infrastructure and infrastructure as a service. So cloud brokers are therefore kind of have an overlap to the kind of cloud evolution of hosting provider models. And finally, cloud broker means a significant transformation of the enterprise's sourcing models and purchasing models. So you need to have in consulting on a cloud transformation service. So that's why it's also related to consulting. So it's a pretty complex thing, but it has a significant value. So let's have a quick look into Forrester's cloud computing taxonomy, which looks at the usual suspects, the infrastructure, the middleware, the application from left to right, but also at the different sharing levels or at the different privacy levels, public cloud, private cloud, and virtual private cloud. And that's a nice picture to see where the value is of cloud brokers. So on the one side, you see here this value around a SaaS broker. So SaaS brokers are simply looking for the best application out of a repository of applications to provision you as a SaaS environment. They could also help you on providing a for example, the best pricing or pooling licenses from different SaaS offerings, or maybe having the same SaaS offering but different license options, maybe more elastic than the original SaaS vendor provides. The infrastructure broker models on the left are coming in two different flavors. So a simple infrastructure broker is coming basically in the way that you pick the right infrastructure out of two or three or a few very similar infrastructure offerings. So for example, if you say, I have a compute or forecasting or simulation job that I need to calculate overnight, do I want to put it on Amazon or on Azure or maybe on Fujitsu overnight? What is a better price? I don't care. Simply do it, please, Mr. Broker or broker service. That's a kind of simple infrastructure broker looking at spot prices and so on. In addition to that, full infrastructure broker models are more sophisticated, which also understand the situation of your private or virtual private infrastructure. And that's what we see on the next slide. So the next slide is kind of showing the full stack and a kind of combination of technology components and business model explanation as well. What you see quickly on the top is that to some extent there's full transparency to the customers. On the right side is the enterprise, on the left side are the cloud providers. So some is fully transparent, but other pieces like the aggregation and dynamic sourcing is not. This is not transparent. And I just want to remind you to the example of my travel agency calling me and said, Stefan, we rebooked you. And I said, okay, so what? Do I have still a ticket? Fine. That's all I need. And that's exactly the situation where you can create value because you shift workloads around, aggregated a higher volume, and that's where you should not ask your end customer and should not at all ask them to kind of confirm your decision. Just do it. Otherwise, you're losing the economy of scale. So on the left side, you see the different cloud computing models, public clouds like dedicated cloud providers, globally acting like Amazon, for example, on the infrastructure side, or the major SaaS vendors on the application side. The virtual private is more the more local vendors, those that have a lot of customer intimacy, for example, with you, or comply to the European data privacy law, hosting in the EU, for example, and those kind of type of providers. And finally, your private environment. Some of the private environment is just in managed service mode or just your own data center, and some is a private cloud. And the trick here is now to create value out of providing the spare capacity of your traditional data center into a private cloud, which can be combined with workloads that you push elsewhere. So who can act as a cloud broker? Now we have two options basically. So either CIOs could become a cloud broker. Actually, what I'm explaining here, and it took me already kind of 20 minutes explaining it, is a pretty complex model. You need to understand a lot the cloud economics, understand what reserved instances pricing versus elastic instances pricing is, and all that kind of details to do this job really well. However, some CIOs might have enough volume to do it and could do it on their own. I think it only works if you have an IT budget bigger than $500 million US or €500 million just IT budget. The other option is that a service provider, so a cloud provider and telco, somebody like you in the call today are doing that. That's an interesting option And it creates significantly value, especially if you also offer traditional IT services and managed services, for example, run a non-cloud data center. And there's a lot of synergy. Just reusing the spare capacity or the temporarily spare capacity of a non-cloud data center, turning it into a private cloud, saves enormous volume of money, of stuff that you could provide, usually in a cloud sourcing. So that's a model that we want to follow a bit. So here's another diagram exactly showing the results from the thought leadership paper that we did on behalf of Cordys, and we asked a lot, what kind of components do we need? Exactly the question is above. What do you regard to be the top most important aspects of the cloud broker scenario? And obviously the unified self-service was an app store type of a self-service offering turned out to be the number one. Others like service aggregation, workload management are quite important as well. And the dynamic sourcing is just happening. It is very important to fulfill the model, but it's not a kind of visible front-running feature that customers want, or that those telcos realize that customers want. So let's get a little bit more into the business model, and I give you one example how this business model changes. And I pick out that example specifically because the original move around cloud computing was just about cost saving. And the cost saving simply happened by switching totally over everything that could go to a cloud into a cloud provider, and the cloud provider had more economy of scale, and therefore the service was simply cheaper. And that kind of momentum is kind of squeezed out already. So we still see that the price is a little bit slowly going down. There's a lot of price pressure and commoditization, but only of the very biggest, like Amazon in the infrastructure as a service piece, the price continues to go down. The other cloud providers are kind of hitting some of their limits already. So that means the price decrease isn't creating the huge momentum. But here's another situation that does create still a lot of momentum. So what you see on the left side is a threefold sourcing strategy. So for example, some of the stuff that you have in a corporate enterprise, in a large enterprise, is for example on-premise. That's the lower part. So think of applications that need to remain on-premise for a very long time. For example, your ERP system if you're in Europe. So obviously, the load of the ERP system is fluctuating. So you have pieces that are unused of that infrastructure. The second layer could be a virtual private cloud, or for example reserved instances that you bought. So instances that you have that are elastic, like in cloud infrastructure, but you get a good price for those if you pay some volume upfront. So that's what you have, for example, with Amazon reserved instances. So obviously, if you just put those workloads that you think make sense there to those instances, some of the instances are unused, so the utilization is not 100% at all. And then you have other jobs that just happens peaky, like doing forecasting jobs or doing disaster recovery situations and so on. That is on the top of the of this three curves. So now what I just did is I basically took the same numbers and the same scale from the three curves left and stacked them into one diagram. What that means is I simply stacked up the on-premise volume with all the other two options, and basically swapped them into the spare on-premise capacity, and only burst out to one or the other cloud sourcing options if I absolutely need to. So this means I'm dynamically relocating workloads between different sourcing options. And that also means that I'm saving to use external cloud capacity in many cases. So that's a huge saving potential in the range of another 50% of the current cloud computing spendings, infrastructure spendings that enterprises do have today. So this is an example that a cloud broker, how a cloud broker can provide value as a full infrastructure broker model. So how mature is the market? Cordys wanted to find out with our help at Forrester how mature that is, especially for you guys on the phone today, to understand when's the right timing to sell this and to push it or bring it to the market. And it's interesting that you have usually these two market momentums, either a vendor, a cloud provider, or a telco or whatever, push a broker offering to a small, medium enterprise or larger enterprise. Or you have a kind of market pull where enterprises are actively asking for it already and say, we only use this cloud provider because you have a good broker service. So the numbers are shown here. So the majority, 88%, are kind of in the push mode still, and only 11 realize that they have a strong pull. And it was interesting to see that some countries are leading. For example, in Australia, there's already a relatively strong pull where enterprises and especially SMBs say clearly, we go to a specific cloud provider because we see the best brokerage here. We are sure we are getting the best price, for example, because that cloud provider actively search for the best options. It might not be 100% the best option that comes from themselves. It might be from somebody else. And idealistic, it's kind of, if you look into a bookstore like the Amazon bookstore, if you search for a book, you get it, or search for consumer electronics, you get the offering from Amazon, but you also get an offering from a different retailer, just side by side to it. Maybe the conditions are different, but maybe it's simply cheaper. But the volume is so this motivates people to go to this retail page because you have a good feeling that you quickly can not only do your purchase but also find a good offering. And that's exactly what will happen when more people realize this value of the broker. We have within the next 1.5 years a quick change of that 50% and more will go into the pull mode, and then for you as a cloud provider, it will be very important to have an offering ready. Otherwise, those that have it ready will get the initial market share. So here's another thing that we calculated actually to estimate the volume of money that you can make with it. So how to estimate that? So as I mentioned, we do have a lot of market data and forecasting data for cloud computing market size, and we calculated that especially as a number of demand size. And there's, for example, a Forrester report that I did with my colleague Holger Kiske, that's called simply sizing the cloud. So if you go to forrester.com and check that out, you see a lot of forecasting for 10 years, actually up to 2020, on all the different cloud computing segments. In addition to that, we looked at how sophisticated people are in that curve of technology and business model adoption that I showed initially, how far they are getting close to the broker model. And so what we looked at here is how many people are using infrastructure as a service today. That is 15%. It will be already 34% in 2015. how many of those people are deploying hybrid scenarios? So scenarios where you have some of your cloud in a private cloud, some in a public cloud, maybe some in a virtual private cloud, and you have the potential of cloud bursting, of dynamic relocations of workloads, where you can make money simply by relocating things quickly to a better option. So 9% today use these hybrid scenarios, 26% in 2015 will use the hybrid scenarios. And only 2% today use already policy-based automation. And policy-based automation is the kind of step just prior to cloud broker scenarios, where you trust a policy engine to make decisions, for example, provisioning decisions to scale up and down applications on your behalf without a human interaction. That's very important. And in 2015, we see that around 13% are using policy-based automation of their virtual infrastructure. And that is a market volume that you are getting, and or the market potential. And let me make a step back and see how much we can get out of that data. Basically, we take those users, so 16% of all infrastructure as a service users today, or 37% of all infrastructure as a service users in 2015. And look at the total market demand. That means we have in total of the total market size of infrastructure as a service, which is more than 1 billion today, and will be 6 billion in 2015 of infrastructure as a service volume that will be done by a broker. Right? That is very important. That is not a total, but it's in the range of this 37% of infrastructure as a service that will be managed by brokers by 2015. That is a huge number. So how much money can you make with a broker? And the broker itself will not be a huge business. So today we see something like a little bit below 100 million, 96 million. And in 2015 only 300 million of revenue that is really broker services, infrastructure broker services. That is not huge, but as I said, those 300 million of infrastructure broker services do influence 6 billion and more of infrastructure that is sourced. This is a very important relation that you see here, and that's why the broker service will be basically stimulating a lot of infrastructure sourcing. So having said those numbers, maybe we bring up our last poll before I wrap up, and ask you as a service provider, now as you know how the market momentum is today and the market size and the potential is, where are you? Do you sell already cloud broker services proactively, or are you receiving customer demand? And if you bring up the last poll now, and I give you some time to click on it. Good. I hope you made your selection. And let me wrap up into the summary what we really found here in this thought leadership paper and the underlying survey that we did for Cordys. First of all, we look into the 3 different groups of people that we looked at. So telcos, system integrators, and those kind of dedicated cloud providers. So usually new companies that have no legacy, no IT managed service, or no consulting approach, really coming with a global new model. Let's have a look at the different situations and how they act. Telcos leverage a lot of their volume through small and medium businesses. So that's why SaaS brokerage is resonating most to them. So that means putting app stores together and offering software as a service applications and also helping those ISVs to get into the software as a service delivery is resonating very well. The small and medium business really consider in many countries the local telco, the former monopolist, as a very trusted supplier, and hope that they will offer a fair broker service offering. The larger enterprises are, as I said, more looking at infrastructure services, and it's interesting that only those telcos that do have a kind of SMB and consumer arm, and also at the same time a kind of system integrator branch, those are the only ones that are very likely in the position to create a unified broker which combines both the infrastructure broker services and the SaaS brokerage. So I'm talking about those large firms like Deutsche Telekom and T-Systems, or British Telecom and BT Business Services, or France Telecom and Orange Business Services. So those kind of combinations that we have are really interesting because they have both sides of the broker services and can leverage the synergies again. For example, use the same app stores, use the same billing environment, and many other services that are adding value to a SaaS brokerage or to an infrastructure brokerage model. The next group is the system integrators. So many system integrators are also providing hosting models today. Most are still struggling to move from an IT managed service and an enterprise hosting to a real cloud model, which is elastic enough. However, some of those are coming up with very, very nice concepts, but are really looking at enterprise at sales channels to target enterprises. Therefore, the infrastructure broker model is more important at this point in time. Over time, the sourcing behavior in large enterprises will come closer to SMBs in the way they pick applications for so-called systems of engagement. So smaller edge applications that do engagement with employees, partners, and customers are also picked in an app store type of model, in a SaaS model, and broker services are becoming interesting here. And then finally, the dedicated cloud providers that are usually looking at global audiences and look at dynamic sourcing concepts. So they stay mostly in simple cloud sourcing and simple cloud broker models. For example, offering a broker services that just looks between options dynamically of very similar services. So as cloud compute power becomes more and more similar, you can imagine service that dynamically push things from Amazon to Azure to Google App Engine and likewise based on spot prices. So that is an interesting value prop for dedicated cloud service providers and dedicated broker services that just look at that economy of scale of spot prices, which is a kind of different flavor here. So I think most of you find themselves in one or the other role here. And with that, I hope this webinar was helpful for you, and I turn it over back to Matt to moderate questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Stefan. That was fantastic. We have some great questions, so I'll go through them in the order that they were asked. The first question is, what kinds of units are cloud providers and administrators using to estimate the needed computing capacity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a good question, because this is significantly changing from the traditional private cloud capacity planning. So the traditional capacity planning that was done by IT, we're really looking in units of compute, storage, and networking. But in the future, you have business units, lines of businesses articulating capacity demand. So, for example, the CFO department says we are scaling down our financial app to a way that it usually runs just fast enough. Not really great, but just fast enough, because that would reduce cost, obviously. But next week we do our quarter closing, so please double our performance next week. And you know, the guy requesting that don't even know what that means in terms of virtual machines or memory, and they don't want to know. They just know they are kind of step by step reduce the capacity for the average use outside the quarter closing, and then they know from the last quarter closing how much more speed they need to do the quarter closing, which is the peak on the financial app, smoothly. So you get these kind of business terms of capacity planning, and it's again a value of the broker to translate that into real infrastructure demand.
Thank you, Stefan. That's great. So the next question is, who would be the best future cloud brokers, coming from the kind of the builder, infrastructure, or enabler side of things?
I think you really need a kind of a combination of all of them, at least from the consulting and from the provider model. Over time, the software components get more mature, and you know, you have you can combine vendors like Cordys with a few other vendors providing maybe billing engines or providing capacity planning capabilities and so on, or changing the existing commodity IT management service applications into the cloud world. So the software side gets more mature, but so you can over time buy more and more of that stack, but definitely you need to have the strong consulting model to transform a company's sourcing and capacity management model. And it's, as I said, it's very helpful to have own services, own infrastructure to provide. So I think it's that combination, companies that have already a strong infrastructure as a service offering, plus understand how to do consulting and cloud transformation.
And so, Stefan, the next question is, do you see, you know, when talking about policy-based automation, is this kind of based on trends, and should this be used to upscale or downscale the resources that are needed?
Yes, absolutely. It's basically translating the knowledge that you had from previous up and down scaling into an autonomous effect of up and down scaling. Simply saying that you scale, you measure continuously, and that's the input into the policy, and that means something scales up and down, or scales out or in. Again, both is important. And there are even, for example, platform as a service offerings that just differentiate by direct pricing. Take the Google App Engine, for example. The Google App Engine is technically not really sophisticated against their competition, but they have a really unique pricing that they kind of took from their advertisement business, because an app engine can make an app as fast as possible, even if millions of users are using, until your money is gone, until the budget is gone that you gave the app engine. So think of those models. If you also take those models for internal apps, well, you shouldn't shut down an app if the budget is exhausted, but you can maybe slow down the app or send out an alert and can say, hey, now either you put more budget in or you have to tell the users that they have to slow down. And things like that, especially for systems of engagement, that is a very, very interesting model. So it's going into both directions, and that's really a transformational challenge, moving from the traditional SLA of enterprises into new cloud dynamic models. And in fact, many apps that we see at Forrester, talking to many enterprise users, many apps are significantly over-provisioned. That means are provisioned in a higher SLA than they require to. So take, for example, the ERP systems and enterprise resource planning systems. So the core production system in many companies need to be mission critical, fully high available. But if the CIO simply say, okay, that's the standard how we do ERP, and we also provide, for example, a development system in the same way, oh, that's a huge waste of money these days. So you have to dramatically cut down the SLAs for those systems that don't need those high SLAs. Cloud provider and cloud broker models make that much, much easier and simply save a lot of money by basically reducing it down to the real business requirement and not just putting a simple standard.
Stefan, we've got quite a lot of questions, so I'll try and get through them as quickly as I can. The next one is, for a cloud broker, is it important to have as many offerings as possible, or is it more important to offer only the best offering?
Mm-hmm.
And we've got quite a few questions, and I think we're running out of time.
Okay, I have to answer quicker. So on the software as a service offering, yes, the number counts. So the more different SaaS offerings you have, the better it is. On the infrastructure, you have to focus on a few of each pattern, so maybe 2 or 3 public clouds, maybe your own virtual private local cloud service, and also the incorporation of the stuff that an enterprise has already. So focus is here good to pool volume.
Thanks, Stefan. The next one is, a lot of this webinar has been about, the company acting as an external cloud broker. Do you see the larger enterprises, acting as their IT departments or whoever it might be, acting as their own internal cloud broker as well?
Yeah. So that was those 2 options that I showed. Either a CIO could act, or the CIO office could act as a cloud broker, or an external service provider can do that for many enterprises actually. And those 2 options are there simply, and I think the external option is getting faster traction because the telcos are desperately looking for value add. That's why telcos and IT cloud providers like Getronics, KPN, for example, are actively experimenting on those models. For the CIOs themselves, CIOs are still about 12 months behind on understanding that model so aggressively, and they have also a huge legacy. So CIOs are moving slower, and I believe those CIOs of the very large companies, so talking about IT budgets of 1 billion or more, some will try it out in the next 12 months. But I haven't seen a full broker service operated by a CIO as of today.
Thanks, Stefan. The next one is, do you have an opinion if the SMB will invest in their own network to connect to the cloud, or will they move to a managed service provider?
Yeah, the SMB will not invest in anything. That's simply the answer.
That's a great short answer. Thank you very much. So I think really probably if we just look at the last question really is, how much do you think software-defined networking will impact on the service broker model?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the software-defined networking and the software-defined data center is the major breakthrough to implement dynamic broker services. So it's an enabling technology, although the broker itself is a business model, right? This is very important. So the broker offering that you offer is a disruptive business model to IT infrastructure and application sourcing. And the software-defined data centers are a enabling technology. So those are very important. Software-defined data centers bring first-time compute and storage and software-defined networking, software-defined firewalls and so on quickly together. So it is what happens behind the scenes in many dynamic sourcing models in the future.
Thank you, Stefan. That was great. I think we've kind of come to the end of most of the questions. We've captured all of the ones here. So if we have missed any, then we'll endeavour to get back to everyone that we missed. But thank you for all the questions, everyone. And really, Stefan, many thanks to you. Thank you for the webinar. Everybody who attended will send you a copy of the white paper. If you'd like to download it yourself, you can see the URL is on the screen right now. And just keep an eye on Cordys.com. There's some other announcements that we have around cloud brokering coming up. And thank you again, Stefan. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And see you on the next one.